Magic the Gathering is a game with a lot of characters. Many people will know of most of the big names in Magic the Gathering, from Jace and Vraska, Liliana, and other similar characters. But there are very important characters to the story that don't really get brought up as often. Of course, you'll have people who are aware of some of the older, big, important characters, such as Urza and Yawgmoth, that sort of shaped the early history of what Magic the Gathering is as characters, but probably Magic the Gathering's most important character does get brought up quite often, but doesn't actually often get talked about, and I want to talk about them a bit. But before I do, I kind of want to talk about Magic the Gathering's story in general. So, Magic has gone through a lot of eras of storytelling. A lot of it will focus on characters, in particular starting after the Ravnica block. Characters have become more central with the introduction of planeswalkers as a card type. These were characters for players to identify with that actually, I guess, were originally sort of introduced. The characters to identify with were sort of introduced in the Legends block with the legendary characters such as Sol Kanar and Dakon Blackblade. But they really took off as face characters with the Ravnica block, where you were introduced to characters such as Jace and Nissa and Liliana, who sort of to this day have continued the face of Magic the Gathering. Before that, you did have big, important characters. Again, we can talk about Yawgmoth and Urza, but the interesting thing about both Yawgmoth and Urza is that neither of them were represented on cards for quite some time, outside of one or two characters that were speculated to be Urza, and then one or two cards that were suspected to be Yawgmoth, although only one of them was ever confirmed to be the character people speculated them to be, that being the Blind Seer being Urza. Characters from the story did show up, such as Gerard Capuchin and Miri, and honestly just the entire crew of the Weatherlight. But they weren't, while they were important to the story, they weren't central to every story going forward. As a matter of fact, going to planes such as Kagawa, you just straightforward didn't hear about anything involving Urza or Yawgmoth or any of that, because this was a vignette. We were introducing and exploring this unique world. The same was with planes like Lorwyn. But we got the introduction of our superhero team with the Planeswalkers. And I say that Planeswalkers were introduced here. If you're familiar with Magic's history, you'll know that there were characters that were already Planeswalkers, the most important being Urza Planeswalker. Urza is the sort of big name Planeswalker in Magic the Gathering, but there were other Planeswalkers as well. As a matter of fact, the most important character in the story is a Planeswalker. Now, I say in the story, this is more like the most important character in Magic the Gathering, sort of the character around which everything sort of spins. Everything sort of goes around this one character. And I guess I should stop with the ruse. That character is you. You see, in the earliest days of Magic the Gathering, you were a Planeswalker. Your 60-card deck represented your combined knowledge of the planes and your ability to channel different aspects of different worlds. You walked between worlds, aka went to different game stores and event nights, and you did magic. You were a wizard of sorts. You were a wizard, and that was what made you unique and special throughout the multiverse. You know, somebody else had a giant scaled worm, but you had learned from Orum's chant, and that is why, combined with the one stick, you could just tell them to just go away forever. I goddamn guess. Orum chant was a event. All the way back to Alpha, Planeswalkers were part of the game, starting with characters such as Warzel and Thumil, who were covered in an excellent video by the YouTuber Alice Blackblade if you're interested in learning about them. But Warzel and Thumil kind of introduced this concept of how you might interact with the game. You see, Warzel was a green-centered planeswalker. Their home of... I don't know if it was actually their home plane, or if... No, I don't think Urgamon was their home. I think they kind of just made a home of Urgamon. I can't remember. Yeah, watch the excellent video by Alice to get the full story of Wurzel and Thumiel. But they went out to another plane. They learned about, blue and white magic from other planeswalkers and wizards. It is important to note that planeswalkers and wizards could both teach planeswalkers. It's just like planeswalkers were much more capable than wizards and spell shapers, because wizards and spell shapers were just sort of they were much more they had a much harder time learning or something. This does kind of shift over time to more focusing on named planeswalkers in the story instead of introducing new interesting ones. You stop getting your Lord Windgraces, you stop getting your Tevizats, and you get a lot more humans, really. The game ends up very human-centric over time, which is a bit of a shame in my mind. But what I want to talk about is you. I want to talk about who you are as a planeswalker, because I think this concept sort of falls to the wayside a lot of the time. With the introduction in 2011 of the first Commander decks, Magic the Gathering players found the ability to much better identify with their decks. And this is because, sure, you could be a red mage, you could really like red cards, but if the best deck in Standard is a blue-green deck, and you are a tournament grinder or even just do FNMs regularly, you're likely to play the blue-green deck, because that's what's best in Standard. You don't really have a cohesive identity. But in Commander, you coalesce around your commander a lot. This was part of why I said previously that Commander feels a lot less like Magic the Gathering and more like D&D, and I don't find this to be a bad thing. I find this actually to be quite an endearing part of what makes Commander Commander. You see, I think identifying with characters is good and fun and enjoyable. Having your little blurbo that you're like, this is he literally me, I am the guy, is really cool and fun and important. And I actually, to a degree, often think about my Commander decks in this sort of a way. When I'm playing Commander, I'm playing a character. I'm playing a role of a weird little guy. One of the questions I previously asked people on Facebook and Twitter or Blue Sky, depending on how long ago it actually was, compared to how long my memory lasts, was how do you think about your commanders? Like, is your commander you, or is your commander like a friend or an ally or a pawn that you're manipulating, and you're the planeswalker pushing the pieces in the background there? Are you Nicol Bolas and your commander is Tezzeret, who just can't help but be manipulated by a big strong man everywhere he goes? Or are you of a mind where, like, this Balin deck isn't Balin the Haymaker going into this fight? This is the Planeswalker, me. His spells are, my access to the world, my expertise, my knowledge, and so on. Originally, I thought of each deck as its own Planeswalker, and I still, to a degree, like to think of decks that way. But somebody on Facebook mentioned that they think of their commanders as allies, and this makes a lot more sense to them. You as the Planeswalker, maybe you're more malleable, whatever, in your magic. They are just... even the Planeswalker has little blurbos on each world. And to some degree, I actually like to think of my stable of commander decks as its own. I right now have Balin the Haymaker, Cross Defense Contractor, the Lord of Pain, Krark the Thumbless, Mirko, Obsessive Theorist, and another deck that runs off of Chaos Wand and has like a million possible commanders to it. And I like to think that these guys sort of exist in the same world. That's how I like to think of it. It especially makes things very fun and cute when you have other players borrow your deck and you're like, oh, this is an intraplane conflict, not interplane. Interplane is when you and other players duel. And I think it makes the character of your games sort of more roleplay like. It's more interesting in my mind, because then you can kind of think of any game, any duel, as like the planes clashing or the people of the planes clashing. Like, I am playing Mirko Vosk, or not Mirko Vosk, Mirko Obsessive Theorist, still Mirko Vosk, whatever, they still have the same last name. But I'm playing Mirko in this game because, maybe he's been sent out to a third-party location in order to scout out for ley lines. It was always ley lines in the original stories, because at the time Wizard Fiction really focused on ley lines. So maybe I'm sending out Mirko in order to scout out for ley line, or to try to track down Lazav, as Mirko's story apparently is that they are just hunting down Lazav to prove that he exists, that he's still alive and everything. I love Mirko so much. They're so weird. But this is how I tend to think of Magic the Gathering, and you are the sort of thing that pulls the story together, or in this case I am, because this is my stable of decks, this is my plane, this is my world, and it's my story. I really like thinking of Magic in this way, and maybe at one point it's less of like plane and more like, oh, I'm a specific person on Dominaria, right? Because Dominaria, of course, was sort of the central plane for the longest time, and you as a player sort of had your little niche. Maybe you didn't actually play the meta deck at a time. Maybe you were like the guy who brought the Spiders deck to the World Championship and won because it was very early in Magic the Gathering's history, and apparently just beating people to death with a woolly spider was a thing. And maybe like if you look over that deck, it gives you the vibe, oh, this is a spiders deck. This planeswalker really likes spiders. They're really into the spider thing. And maybe it's like Lolth from the Forgotten Realms. But I don't think it gets acknowledged quite enough how important the player is to Magic the Gathering. Like, to the game itself, yes, you obviously understand that you matter to the game, but to the player playing, often I feel like it gets sort of left behind, and to the story developers even, it kind of gets left behind how important it is that the player is the central piece of the story. You experiencing the set, experiencing the world, are a massive piece of what pulls the world together. This actually, I think, can even make sets like the upcoming Spider-Man set even more enjoyable, as controversial as that might sound, because like if you start with Spider-Man, if that's how you get into Magic the Gathering, this is an isekai situation, right? Like you start out in Spider-Man, maybe you even start out as like your legendary creature that you prefer is not actually any of the Spider-Men or anything. Maybe it's like Jameson. I think J. Jonah Jameson, is he the only legendary normal guy in the set? Okay, it looks like Flash Thompson, Aunt May, and J. Jonah Jameson are like the normal guys in this set. So imagine, these are your starting commanders, because you just apparently are very much so into, I don't know, being a normal guy in Magic the Gathering. You just want to be a Spider-Man fan in Magic the Gathering. Honestly, I love that. But this could be like the isekai thing where like, okay, I'm going to take my J. Jonah Jameson character, and now we're going into Magic the Gathering's world? What? And as it, you're now experiencing this world of like magic and wonder, and now I have magical spells and everything. And I think this is really cool. Mind you, I'm not the biggest fan of Universes Beyond, but to have these opportunities where like the lore can, some sort of imagined lore can really like make up for some of the weirdness in sets. And more than that, honestly, you can just like centralizing the story around yourself can make Magic much more enjoyable in my mind. And this has always been where Magic's been for me, is like it's always been about the players. It's never been like about Urza or Jace or Vraska, even if their inclusion in the stories is pretty interesting, I think having a character through which you experience the world and then being like, and there's also other parts of the world for you to go explore yourself, and that's what your deck is you exploring that plane. This is you in the limited environment, I guess fighting for ley lines or whatever, and that's what packs are. I'm kind of just meandering here. It's something I really like to think about. I think it's very fun to think of the player as the main character of the story. And I really hope that you do get on board with the idea that, like, the players are the most important characters. You know, while it's nice to have your Spider-Mans and your Jaces and your Urzas and your... What's it been since the Gatewatch? Have there been new important... Will and Rowan were, like, important for 2 or 3 sets. Then there was Kellen and Lute. Who mattered in Innistrad? Sorin? Sorin was pretty important. The Markovs in general, I think, were important to that set. But, I think something like Brandon Sanderson's Children of the Nameless does a much better job of, like, here is one Planeswalker's experience of the plane, and now here's this whole world for you to go and experience for yourself. And I think that that kind of a story could be a great boon to Magic the Gathering. And I hope that you look at your commander deck and you start asking yourself the question, who the fuck are these people to me and who am I to them? And honestly, if you have an answer, let me know. I really want to know. I want to know how you relate to your commander decks. And if you've never thought about it before, like, just start fielding ideas. Like, oh, you know, maybe I am the Planeswalker. Maybe I'm not even a Planeswalker. Maybe I'm more like Yawgmoth, who never attained Planeswalker status, even though he directly took control of a plane. He kind of became the World Soul, which is a whole thing in Magic. It's been there for a while. Brandon Sanderson wasn't the first person to do it, but he was like the first person I know that really drew attention to the existence of the World Soul, outside of Ravnica. Anyway, I'm rambling again. That's gonna be it for now. Thank you for listening, and yeah, let me know what you think of, I guess, the most important character in Magic. I think they're pretty cool, so thank you very much and have a nice day.